world celebrate Christmas in some shape or form, and everyone has their own ideas about this holy day. In this video, we're going to take a look at what this time of year actually is, according to sidereal astrology, and how the patterns that happen in the sky every year around December 25th are a reflection of an important aspect of the human experience. It is claimed that at the time the Julian calendar was established, just a few years after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, December 25th actually corresponded with the winter solstice, which is the day of least light or greatest darkness each year. On our current Gregorian calendar, the winter solstice usually falls on December 21st or 22nd, and you can see here that in 2023 the shortest day will actually be December 21st, with 9 hours, 1 minute, and 1 second between sunup and sundown. In my opinion, the best way to verify a solstice is to put a stick in the ground and mark the shadow at solar noon. The winter solstice will be the day with the longest shadow. Now, you might have noticed that the sunrise continues to creep later and later until January 9th, when the sun will finally rise a minute earlier than it did the day before. So even after the solstice, the mornings will continue to feel like they're getting a little bit darker until we're pretty well into the new year. And if you look back into December, you'll see that the sun sets at its earliest in the afternoon of December 3rd at 4:41 p.m. here in Buffalo, and it stays there at 4:41 until December 16th, when it starts to set at 4:42. So the afternoons can start to feel a little bit lighter even before the solstice occurs. And that seems strange to me when I first realized it, but now I think I know why that happens. It's an illusion that's created by our clocks because they're not synchronized with solar noon. And I would think with today's GPS technology that should be pretty easy to sync with. We should be able to have wearable or carryable technology that continuously synchronizes itself with solar noon as the foundational basis for time each day depending on our geographical position. That would reconnect us back with the solar cycles we personally experience each day. But we don't do this. We continue to use clocks and calendars which actually disconnect us from the natural cycle of the sun. And I think one of the things we're going to have to do if we want the human race to make it through this transitional period that seems to be reaching a crescendo as we move into 2024 will be to connect our bodies and our minds with these natural cycles in the sky. We need to desynchronize our diurnal rhythms away from artificial clocks and calendars, unplug from the matrix, and resynchronize ourselves with nature. And what better way to do that than looking up at the sky? So winter solstice rituals and celebrations seem to have existed for millennia. The birth of the Persian Zoroastrian god Mithra was celebrated around the solstice, and he's not the only one. Many ancient religions had a sun god, which would make sense because the sun is the greatest light in the sky. And these religions all celebrated the birth of the sun sometime around the day of greatest darkness. So it would seem pretty obvious that this time of year has always been chosen because this is when we experience the birth of a new solar year, when the literal Son of God is reborn or resurrected, which is why I think this is a more appropriate time of year to celebrate the crucifixion and resurrection, which we celebrate in Easter, and the birth of the new baby should be celebrated in the spring after the vernal equinox as the egg and bunny fertility ritual, but that's just me. In the Christian tradition, the nativity of the baby Jesus is symbolic of a new light coming into the world. It seems pretty obvious that the Christmas story,
you'll shoot your eye out, kid,
not that Christmas story, is a retelling or a repackaging of much older mythologies, which, ironically, are often referred to in a derogatory fashion as pagan rituals. But I think it's actually really important for us to all realize that rituals aren't all evil. Some are, but like it or not, we all engage in rituals. Some of them might be ceremonial and formal, like communion at church every week, but many of them are very mundane and habitual, like saying grace or knocking on wood. The fact is, all rituals are performed in order to invoke some type of spiritual or non-physical or supernatural power, something we can't see or measure that might be able to influence our lives and experiences in a positive way. And this is where we have to be very careful because our intention, if pure and noble, will likely invoke or attract spiritual entities of the same vibrational quality. I would call these types of entities angels. But if our intentions are tainted or selfish or even nefarious in nature, then our rituals are going to attract entities of those vibrational qualities, and I would call these types of entities demons. So if you're going to perform a ritual, and there are many rituals associated with Christmas, you better be clear about your intention, and you better understand very clearly who or what you're intending to invoke. Some of the symbols around Christmas may have demonic roots. It's possible that Santa Claus was created to get everyone to practice mock child sacrifice to Moloch every year.
What do you want for Christmas, little boy?
I don't know if that's true, but I do know if you're just doing these rituals mindlessly, going through the motions without really inserting your own thoughts and intentions, then you're going to end up helping to invoke whatever supernatural entity the creators and producers and directors of those rituals intend to invoke. The early Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican, openly condemned certain ritual practices over the centuries. The people they called pagans were able to connect directly with divinity through nature, and they didn't need the church to act as an intermediary. Freemasons were another group demonized by the church because they were trying to connect directly with divinity in their own temples, with their own rituals. And you can imagine how this might be perceived as a threat to the church's authority, because any religion can be used as part of what I call the unholy trinity, the three branches of control that can be used by a few people who call themselves royalty or government or the ruling class to enslave and oppress the people who live and work within that civilization. The three focal points of the unholy trinity are the political, which allows the exertion of legislative control through laws and penalties, the military, which exerts physical control through intimidation and brute force if necessary, and then the ecclesiastical, which allows the controllers to shape morality and create rituals that work to reinforce their system of control and enslavement. And because there have always been rituals around the day of greatest darkness, the winter solstice, it would have made sense for the Roman government to adopt this practice and create its own winter solstice ritual within the religion they were crafting, with the declaration by the Council of Nicaea, led by Emperor Constantine, that Jesus Christ wasn't just a man, he was indeed a God. They declared in 325 AD that Jesus was begotten, not made, meaning he has existed eternally, part and parcel with God the Father, both having been begotten from the same substance. And I actually do believe that to be true, but we have to at least acknowledge there's a possibility that the Roman government, through the Vatican, may have twisted this idea into a form that would benefit itself rather than one that would benefit we the people. And I think it's pretty obvious that all governments attempt to use religion to control the masses to some degree, and I think that at times this has been very effective. But eventually the taint of government will corrupt and pollute religion, and evil things will start to come to the surface. Then people will begin to leave the religion and turn from the spiritual practices altogether, and then the tendency is for society as a whole to become more agnostic, secular, and scientific. Sound familiar? Now, just because governments have corrupted religions and used them to control populations, that doesn't mean we have to turn away from all religion and throw that baby out with the bathwater. Religion is a tool, like a hammer, and it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. We can use religion and its symbols and its rituals for the benefit of each other, or we can all be used by religion for the benefit of the ruling class. The word religion actually comes from the Latin religare, which means to bind. Government can and does use religion to bind people into obedience. But we the people can also use religion, if we so choose, to bind ourselves together, unifying around a set of moral principles and beliefs in order to stand in opposition to a tyrannical government. And this is what our founding fathers did. And this sets up a tough situation for government because the people then have bound themselves to an authority that's higher than the authority of government. And that's why I think religion used in the right way, practiced in the right way, has always been a threat to government. So we can see that it does seem to make sense to celebrate the birth of the Son of God, part of the divine Holy Trinity, on the day when the world turns the corner and starts to get lighter again. The old sun dies as the days get shorter and shorter through the fall and into the winter, and then a new sun is born, metaphorically, on the winter solstice. The sun brings light and heat and life to this world. When it's light, we can see things more clearly. We have better access to the truth. The sun is a symbol of Christ consciousness, which is that spark of divine light that can exist within each of us, and that can become brighter or dimmer based on how well we're able to purify our own personal divine trinity, which consists of the mental, the emotional, and the physical. Christians are encouraged at this time of year to practice preparing ourselves for the return of Christ, which I think, and this is just my own personal belief, has to begin from within the individual. We have to invite Christ, who is himself a symbol of love and truth, into our hearts. But he has to come through here first. The head, the crown, Golgotha, the place of the skull, the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple, right between the temples. In Catholic Mass, we say, "Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word, and my soul shall be healed." Christ is often called the Lamb of God, which corresponds astrologically to the constellation of Aries, the ram with the golden fleece. In the human body, Aries represents the head, and it's an anagram of the verb arise. We have to rise up to improve and purify ourselves from the root to the crown. And only when we arrive up here will we finally have full access to open the door and let him in.
Do me a favor, open the door and let him in.
And the Christmas tree is an evergreen, a type of tree that does not die in the winter. So it's kind of interesting that chopping down and killing an evergreen became such a popular Christmas tradition. I think we may have all been fooled a little bit on that one. The evergreen is also called the pine and produces some cones which are symbols of the pineal gland, which some believe to be the physical epicenter for the third eye, the Ajna chakra. To me, the Christmas tree is a symbol of our body. The lights are symbolic of waking up or enlightenment, and the star or angel on top of the pine tree is a symbol of the divine spiritual consciousness entering the human body through the crown chakra so that it can pass through the mind, through the visual cortex, through the language center, and finally into the heart. At this time of year, it can be helpful to write a few things down that you can do, actions you can take that will allow you to purify or strengthen your mind, your heart, and your body. In alchemy, this is the mercury, the sulfur, and the salt. When we get right down to it, it seems like a lot of religions and mystery traditions have all been trying to tell us the same thing. I don't think the Savior of humanity is going to materialize and rescue the good from the evil. He has to be brought forth from within us. We have to do the great work. And when enough people awaken or arise and start contributing to that great work, he will have returned. So as the world celebrates Christmas, look for the rituals you can see and ask yourself why they're being performed. Start to recognize the symbols and find out for yourself what those symbols might represent. And then you can decide for yourself whether or not you'll continue to perpetuate the use of those symbols and rituals. Maybe you won't. But if you do, you could set your own intention and use the symbols and rituals around Christmas and the winter solstice to help bring your vision of the world into manifestation. I wish you all a blessed Christmas and a revolutionary New Year. Because this is when we experience the birth of a new soul. What the fuck?